All right, so thanks for the introductions, Serene. So I run the business and portfolio for data analytics for Dell EMC. A lot of you guys may be thinking, what does Dell EMC have to do with analytics? Well, Dell and EMC merged, as you guys know, last year. And we've essentially combined the two infrastructure portfolios of these two companies. And we are building out solutions that are pre-integrated with a lot of the analytics stacks, like Hadoop, SAS, Splunk, what have you. And we're offering them as solutions. So that's what we do at EMC. So I'm responsible for both the business side of the house as well as the portfolio side of the house for that. Prior to that, I used to run a product strategy for Pivotal, which is a Hadoop distribution. How many of you guys are technical? Okay, and how many of you guys are business side? All right, just give me a good idea. So, so Pivotal is one of the Hadoop distributions. Hadoop is a big data technology. And prior to that, I ran services for analytics at Ericsson for 3 years, basically around telco analytics. And interestingly enough, I have a graduate school background in data science back in 1993. And we had my graduate coursework and all of that was paid by Mayo Clinic. And that was an NFS and a Mayo Clinic combined project around analysis of EEG signals from patients. So it was a healthcare analytics project. We were implementing what is called as nonlinear principal component analysis. So basically reducing the dimensionality of EEG data using nonlinear transformations. So that was back in 1993, right? And since then, I've kind of moved over to the business side. I've been on the business side for a long time. But the interesting fact is a lot of the algorithms and a lot of the mechanisms that we used back then are still very relevant today in data science, right? What's changed is the sophistication of the tools to run quickly, execute on projects, the availability of more data, and as a consequence of that, the general awareness in the industry around, hey, we got to do something about this because if we don't, the competition is going to do that and we'll be in a mess, right? So that really leads us to this topic around, how do you help business leaders understand how to successfully run, successfully implement and run advanced analytics projects, okay? So to discuss that, we really need to understand what kind of, how do you come up with a taxonomy of how companies think about advanced analytics, right? And this is kind of my worldview of that at a 10,000-foot level, right? So we have companies whose sole sources of revenue is analytics based, right? And so those are, either the up-and-coming internet, data-driven companies like Uber, Amazon, Airbnb, Google, so forth, or they're companies that are doing primary research, right? Either life sciences research, genomics research, stock market analysis, environmental research, those kind of companies. But there are a lot of other companies in bread and butter companies, I would say, kind of in different verticals, right? Healthcare vertical, telco, financial services, automotive, that are, their sole revenue source is not analytics, right? It's something else. So there's a gap in terms of senior management's commitment, right, within these two types of companies, okay? So today we're going to focus on the companies on the left-hand side, right, kind of the bread and butter companies, and how do we get senior management to successfully, align with and fund and invest in advanced analytics projects. So if you go to the boardroom of a lot of these companies that are on the left-hand side of the previous chart, these are the kind of questions that get asked to the stakeholder that's actually running analytics practice, right? It could be a chief data officer, it could be a VP or director of data analytics. These are some of the questions that those guys get asked by the rest of the executive team, right? Okay, this is great technology. What is the return on investment? And when can I have it, right? How can I trust advanced analytics to make decisions on my behalf, right? Because I've been making decisions based on business intuition for decades, right? So now you're telling me a machine will tell me when I'm right or when I'm wrong. What are some of the hidden costs if you were to implement these kind of projects? And then what is the changes that we have to make in the organization to make this all happen? Okay. So these are the questions that Chief Data Officer or Data Analytics executive needs to be able to answer to the rest of the board. And that's a key thing, because you can talk about all these things until the cows come home, but until you have executive sponsorship in those companies that are kind of the bread and butter vertical companies, you're going to have a tough time actually getting funding and being successful in these engagements. So let's talk about all those things, right? Those 4 bullets. So let's start with return on investment for analytics. This is one of the toughest problems and the toughest questions that, frankly, none of the consulting companies, such as McKinsey or IBM or any of the large consulting companies, have a problem with a straightforward answer for this question, right? What is the return on investment for analytics? In my experience, it helps to look at it kind of like in the stock market, right? It's a trade-off between risk and reward, okay? So you have, let's say, stocks and you have bond funds, right? You have stock funds and you have bond funds. Well, with stocks, you have a higher risk, but then you have a higher potential for rate of return. In the bond funds, it's more predictable, right? In terms of risk and returns. So you can actually bifurcate analytics, advanced analytics use case into 2 columns or 2 buckets. Cost and risk mitigation type use cases. Right? You already have a cost of running your business or serving your customers or building products or operational costs. Or you already have risk in terms of either IT risk, financial risk, right? These are known entities that you're going through today. And so how do you contain those costs, right? So you come up with cost-saving use cases. Those are much more focused and narrow related to the column on the right-hand side, because you already know what those costs are that you're trying to save, right? And from the cost-saving use cases, then you say, okay, if we want to build predictive models, right, that help us with those use cases. Where a lot of the companies kind of drop the ball is that arrow in dark blue, which is from the predictive models, you need to build out a cost savings model. That's what a lot of companies say, okay, we built a predictive model, let's go and implement the project now, okay? But companies, as they mature in their thinking, would actually take that predictive model, build a cost model based on that predictive model, right? With probabilistic predictions. And then based on the cost model, they'll say, okay, this is the fixed cost of executing on this project, these are the life cycle costs, so this is my return on investment, okay? And I've executed on several projects along these lines, cost and risk mitigation projects. Typically, I've seen anywhere between 50% to 300% return on investment. Okay, you can say, okay, that's a very wide range, but it really depends on the type of use case you're talking about. Right? But it's still very quantifiable. Okay, in relation to the stuff on the right-hand side, which is revenue generation use cases. So oftentimes, these use cases are kind of like top-down use cases. Hey, we have this new market that we don't understand or we want to get into, right? We want to expand our addressable market space. So let's think of some use cases to do that. Let's build our predictive models. Let's build our revenue models. Those are more open-ended use cases. And that's why it's so hard to actually come up with meaningful revenue models that you can actually, commit to. Okay? So that's where a lot of companies look at ROI. There's a big question mark for a lot of companies, right? So for companies that are trying to mature on the left-hand side column, they're better off starting with the cost and risk mitigation type use cases. Okay? And the stuff that I've highlighted here are kind of the hidden costs, right? I know there's another talk on lifecycle costs, right? Lifecycle of data models. That's often overlooked, right? You have lifecycle costs for solutions. You have lifecycle costs for software products or hardware products. A lot of people don't really understand the lifecycle cost of managing an analytical model. And that's because analytical models are built on assumptions that are driven by environmental factors. Environmental factors always change, right? So which means you have to constantly look at the model and update it. So those costs are real costs that are oftentimes underestimated in projects. Okay, so here's the other part of it, right? How do you get executive management to start trusting advanced analytics, right? The technology behind it, okay? And IBM had proposed this kind of a maturity model, right, for advanced analytics. They start off with descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive model. And it was really, very thoughtful, right, to have this kind of a model. And almost like 10, 15 years ago, I think they came up with this model. But since then, there's been a lot of confusion and debate about what's predictive and what's prescriptive, right? And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, does it really matter if you're doing a predictive analytics project or if you're doing a prescriptive analytics project? The reason it matters, in my view, is because you can actually think of the trust that management places in analytics projects based on these terms, right? In my view, if predictive model is where management is willing to launch advanced analytics projects, but doesn't necessarily trust everything about that project, right? So they want, it's kind of like a newborn baby, right? You don't trust it. Whereas in a prescriptive model, you have developed trust, right? Your child is 20 years old, he's starting to, stand on his own feet, right? So that's a level of, it's a level of trust that business places into the analytics projects that in a way defines whether a model is prescriptive or predictive. So let's talk about those two models, or evolution between those two models, right? So we start off with the predictive model. So in the predictive model, obviously there's a model and what the model provides, and then there's the business intuition, right? Should we expand the business in this area, or how do we mitigate churn for our customers, or how do we change our product portfolio, those kind of things. So the predictive model, so the arrow going from the predictive model to the business intuition is kind of narrow or thin, because the business guys don't really trust that model yet. I mean, they're getting data from it, but they have their own notion of what is right and wrong. And on the other side, the arrow going in the opposite direction is thick or broad, because the business manager has to do a lot of babysitting of the model, right? They need to explain to the model, make sure the assumptions are right, make sure the model is doing the right thing. And as a result, the predictive model is often applied to a small segment of what we call the target business entities, okay? Target business entities is nothing but customers or products or your services or operations. So if you have, let's say you're a Verizon, you have 100 million customers, right? And you want to build a predictive model for containing churn. Well, you're not going to apply that model to 100 million customers, right? You're going to take a small subset of that, see how it works. If you're a Starbucks and you want to launch oatmeal, you're not going to launch it nationwide, right? You're going to take a small sample of stores, launch it, see how it works. So those are the attributes of the predictive model. The other aspect of the predictive model is how it interprets data from the environment, right? So at that level, you're not quite sure how to actually make meaningful use of environmental data. So that's why that arrow from the environment is kind of thin, right? Now, switching to the prescriptive model, here's where the model has grown up. So the model is able to provide really strong prescriptive, right, decisions towards the business folks, right? And the business folks don't have to babysit the model as much because the model in a way is self-learning, right? It's taking environmental parameters and it's actually learning how the environment is changing. So you're not needing to babysit the model because it's actually using the environmental variables much more effectively. And it's also targeting a larger segment of your target business entities. So you're applying that model to 80% of your customers or 80% of your products. Right? So that's the way to think of it. So when senior management says, hey, how can I trust the technology? Then you say, okay, let's start with a predictive model, right? Start small and then iterate. So the last part, business and organizational structures. So this is a really tricky part, right? Because the senior management is looking at it and saying, okay, how are these new analytics projects going to impact how we do business, right? And what the organizational structure means, right? here also it behooves companies to take a kind of a gradual maturity approach, right? So we start off with, you have IT, you have different lines of business, maybe different business units, and then you have corporate, right? So oftentimes what companies do is they say, okay, let's try to get a couple of use cases addressed around the cost mitigation space, right? And oftentimes companies find out that their data is spread across multiple data stores, enterprise data warehouses, what have you. So they have to do some sort of a federation of data, right? And that's always not easy, both from a procedural point of view as well as from a technology point of view. Because a lot of these data sources are from different vendors. Right? One's from Oracle, one's from IBM, the other one's from Teradata. How do you federate data across the board? Okay. So that's one of the common challenges that companies face when they're trying to do this kind of analytics. And the other aspect of this is when you start sharing data across these different equivalent data sources, you get into issue of data integrity, data lineage, data ownership, data management, data security, right? Those are all issues that you need to grapple with. Okay. So the higher level of maturity there is really having a analytics initiative or initiatives driven from the management side, where you have a stakeholder in the company, such as a chief data officer or a VP or director of analytics, and you have different business units and different entities within the organization, and you have a kind of a more of a hierarchical structure, right? So there are some advantages to this. As you all know, in data science, the more sources of information you have, the higher the probability that the predictions are going to be more meaningful. So by being able to correlate data across multiple sources in one place, you're able to do better, more effective analytics. Economies of scale.